Well, greetings. Welcome back to our study on the Book of Esther. Today we are in Esther chapter 6. If you have not yet read the chapter, I suggest pausing the video, going back and reading the chapter. I'll give you a second to pause the video. And if you did, welcome back. If you didn't, hey, glad you already read it. Today we are in Esther chapter 6, where we start to see the great reversal of the book. The king has had a wonderful night with the queen, and yet somehow, despite being wined and dined, he can't sleep. Now, this seems almost providential because he's feasted, and yet he can't sleep. The only thing I can think of is he must have had a major case of indigestion. And we're not really told what's going on. We're not told why, but he asks his people to bring in the book of records, the business dealings of the kingdom of Persia. We're not told if the reason is he can't sleep and he knows that listening to the monotony of the records being read will put him to sleep, or if he just can't sleep and so he figures, well, I can't sleep, so maybe I will just get some work done. Either one's possible, but we know that he can't sleep and he decides to have these records read to him, and he hears about the story that opened this whole scene, the whole scenario of Mordecai saving his life. Mordecai has foiled a plot that would have an assassination attempt on King Ahasuerus, and the king thinks to himself and says, well, what did we ever do for him? And the person reading it checks the record. Nothing. We did nothing for this man who saved your life. And, well, the king's in a good mood. I mean, even if he can't sleep, he's in a good mood. He just had a fun time, and so he's in a generous mood. And he calls Haman in because Haman is the only court official who's out in the court right then. If I was the king, I'd be wondering what kind of crazy man Haman is, who, gets to wine and dine the king and queen, and then no sooner does he wine and dine the king and queen, he comes to work. I would be really questioning his sanity. Honestly, if I were in the king's position, I'd be wondering, why isn't this man coming in late today? You'd think he had so much fun with Queen Esther that he would perhaps come in late. Anyway, the king calls Haman in. Haman's a top official. He's a top sage in the kingdom, one of the best advisors. So he should know how to help the king. Notice again, the king does not make a decision. He is not making a decision unilaterally on how to favor Mordecai after Mordecai's help in saving his life. This king isn't doing this to be diplomatic. He's not doing this because he is a leader who values input from others. No, he's doing this in the book. What we're presented with is a king who is incompetent. This is to show us that the king is, in fact, incompetent and clearly unable to make decisions on his own. So he calls in Haman. Now, this is where we start to, not that we haven't seen Haman's character all along, but this is like the capstone of Haman's character right here. This man has just had a private banquet with the king and the queen. The king and his wife, they've sat down together and had a private banquet where he was the only one invited. He has had just tremendous honor bestowed on him. And yet when the king looks at him and says, what do I do for the person who I want to honor? Haman's only thought is, well, who else could he want to honor? hundreds of thousands of people in this kingdom, but I'm the only one who possibly the king could want to honor right now. What has he done? Nothing that we're aware of. He hasn't done anything. But in his mind, he is so haughty that he is the only one that could possibly have the king find favor in him. And this just really reinforces how terrible a person Haman is. This reinforces how much his selfishness and his pride have gotten to him. He is no longer able to see anyone other than himself. And so he comes up with what amounts to a very audacious plan to sit in the king's seat and wear the king's clothes, is to be given a bit of the king's authority. This is huge. This is not a small ask. Yes, today, if you said to the President of the United States that the person you want to honor should get to wear one of your suits and drive around in your limousine for a little while, that would be, that'd be kind of cool, right? We have similar honors. NBA players give shoes to kids in the crowd when they when they do something. A baseball player might give away a glove, or since the World Cup is going on as I'm making this video, soccer players exchange jerseys. We have vestiges of this, but the ancient world really had a belief that if you wore someone's clothes, you were invested with their power in some way. So what Haman is asking is for the king to give this person some of the king's own power, which would have been seen as at least quasi-divine power. This is just a huge ask. And Haman, of course, we know is being selfish and asking for it himself. But this is where we almost get this kind of sitcom style level comedy. Before Haman can say anything else, the king goes, "Great idea, bring in Mordecai." This is sitcom. You can see Haman, like, think of like a Looney Tunes cartoon right now, but his jaw literally on the floor. You can see it in kind of a cheesy sitcom where the king he hears Haman's request and turns to another servant to make arrangements for this for Mordecai. And as he's doing so, Haman, who can't be seen by the king, intentionally can't be seen by the king, really is blowing up behind him. That's kind of the scene that we're presented with. And Haman himself is forced to lead the Mordecai around in the king's place. Haman, who is one of the chief advisors of this kingdom, who thought he was going to be in glory, is forced to humble himself before the man who he has made, who he has claimed is his enemy. Haman is here made low so Mordecai can be raised up. This is the start of the great reversal of the book. Haman loses his authority. He loses his power. We are here not, we kind of have Mordecai being revealed as a Jew, which, you think he should have known that all along. That shouldn't be, that should be common knowledge by this point. But somehow it's remained somewhat a secret. And the Jew who is supposed to be killed and destroyed, not just because of Haman's original decree, but because Haman was supposed to go in to the king and ask him for the favor of killing Mordecai. But before he can get that out, he is asked his opinion, and it throws everything off. Mordecai is starting to be raised up. This man who at the start of the chapter looked as good as dead is now being raised up to the heights of the kingdom, while Haman is being brought low. And as we think about this, one of the things that I have to think about when I think about this chapter is the role of divine providence. We think about God and we think about God's providence. But when it plays out like this, what we see here is a series of coincidences. Now, yes, we can say, well, this is just a story. We can absolutely try to say this is just a story, but it is, even if we take that approach, it is clearly meant to be illustrative of something else. It is meant to highlight what people see in the real world. What people see in the real world are a series of coincidences and things that line up in a very specific way. And the Jewish people and Christians have seen this again and again, which lends credence to the idea that God is working. In our language, in the Christian language, in the Jewish language, this is our confirmation of our faith, that God really is working in the world to help us. Now, we look at this and we say, to what level does God intervene like this? Personally, I am always, in some ways, quick to believe in divine providence and slow to believe in divine providence at the same time. I am quick to say thank you to God for things that I think are providential. I am very quick, or at least I try to be very quick when I see what looks like divine providence. I try to be very quick in saying thank you and recognizing that in my own life. But at the same time, I also recognize that what I see as divine providence might not be something that others can hang their hat on. What appears to be for me divine providence might not be something that is very convincing for you. To you, it might seem as a coincidence. So when I think of divine providence personally, I think of something that is meant to build me up personally, but not necessarily something that is meant to build or for me to use to build you up. So it can be there, and we should be quick to praise God for providence and for things that we see as divine providence. But I think we should be also very slow in saying to others, "Hey, this is how we know God's there. Look what God's done here." We can do that, certainly, and with our friends we should, like the people who are closest to us and who will be built up in the Christian faith by that. Yeah, but I've had too many people look at me and kind of roll their eyes at these claims, because to them they're just a coincidence and meaningless. And at that point, I've learned just to drop the ideas because they're not going to be convincing. But here we see the Jewish people starting to be saved because God is intervening in a way that we didn't see coming. We are used to these grand, miraculous gestures, God intervening, and here the most we can say is God gave the king a very poor night's sleep, and that's the intervention, because that starts the ball rolling. That brings Mordecai to favor instead of death, and that's kind of what we need to think about. We need to look again at the characters, look at how the king is completely incompetent, but where the incompetence earlier led to hardship and negative outcomes for the Jews, now that the king's incompetence is going to lead to blessings for the Jews. Haman, his own pride is starting to cause him to stumble and fall. His own pride is going to be his undoing. This is the book of Proverbs come to life, where the book of Proverbs talks to us about uh, pride and haughtiness being leading to disaster. Well, here we have Haman with his pride and his haughtiness are going to lead to his destruction. Mordecai still remains kind of a passive character. He's not much more than a set piece at this point. He doesn't really do anything, but he goads Haman just by existing. And now we are left at this point where Haman is about to, he's just beside himself, but he's about to go to another feast with just the king and the queen. And that is going to be kind of where we leave this. We're going to see how Haman responds to his great humiliation when he gets really one more chance to come back from this and ingratiate himself back in with the king. And so until I see you again, God bless. Remember, if you do have any questions, just let me know and I will try to deal with them as best I can. Until then, have a great day.